Racist cop insults black woman unaware she recorded his every step for a federal corruption tribunal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Maya Johnson had always been a woman of quiet strength, but today, in the midst of a bustling downtown street, she was feeling something different, an unmistakable sense of tension hanging in the air. A typical day had taken a sharp turn when she was stopped by a police officer while walking to her car. Officer Richards, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a scowl that seemed to be permanently etched into his face, stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Maya's eyes narrowed slightly, her body instinctively tense, but she did not speak. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what this was about. "Where do you think you're going, miss?" Richards asked with an exaggerated drawl, his voice laced with condescension. Maya kept her composure. She'd dealt with this before. People who saw her as nothing more than a stereotype judged her based on the color of her skin rather than who she really was. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of reacting. "I'm just heading to my car," she replied, her voice calm, measured, not allowing any emotion to creep in. But Richards wasn't satisfied with her answer. His eyes flicked over her, sizing her up with the kind of disdain that had become all too familiar in her life. He stepped closer, blocking her even further. "Oh, I'm sure you are," he said, his voice thick with sarcasm. "Just another day in the life of a criminal." The words stung, but Maya didn't flinch. She stood her ground, unwavering. As the officer continued his tirade, mocking her silently and making assumptions about her based on nothing more than the color of her skin, Maya's mind was already working. She had expected this. She had known what was coming when she walked out of her apartment that morning. She had anticipated his actions. The voice recorder hidden in the pocket of her jacket had been running the entire time. Maya was no ordinary woman on the street. Maya was an undercover FBI agent, and today she had a mission. Richard's harassment wasn't just another racist encounter to her. It was evidence. Evidence that could bring down the network of corruption within the very police department he represented. She hadn't planned for this moment to be the one that would expose him, but now that it was happening, she was ready. The officer's behavior wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a much bigger problem, a problem she had been quietly gathering evidence on for months. Maya had been investigating a ring of crooked cops, people like Officer Richards who used their positions to intimidate, humiliate, and even break the law with impunity. She wasn't about to let this moment slip away, and neither would her recording. Richards, still oblivious to the woman standing before him, continued his mockery, completely unaware that Maya had been collecting evidence against him and his colleagues. She wasn't just some random woman on the street. She was someone who had been working tirelessly behind the scenes to expose the truth. And now, as Richards made his way to his police car, still babbling on about his racist assumptions, Maya simply smiled to herself. The time for revenge would come. It would come when he least expected it. And it would be a moment of justice for all those who had been silenced by people like him. Maya walked away from the scene, her heartbeat steady and focused. She couldn't afford to let her emotions get in the way. Officer Richards had no idea who he had just insulted. Maya had grown accustomed to this, being underestimated, judged, and written off as just another face in the crowd. But today was different. Today she had proof. Proof that could finally expose the corruption she had been tracking for months. The last thing Richards knew was that Maya was just another woman on the street, someone to humiliate and push around. What he didn't know was that Maya was a woman with a plan. She had heard the whispers, seen the patterns, and now she was ready to take action. The recordings in her pocket, the ones capturing every vile word Richards had spoken, would be her ticket to unraveling a system built on lies. As she walked to her car, she couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. It wasn't personal. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. She had learned long ago that the law didn't always protect the innocent. But she was going to change that. Getting in her car, Maya took a deep breath and started the engine. She had to stay calm. This was just the beginning. She had a meeting scheduled with her team later that day. There was still much to do, and her mission wasn't over yet. The next step was going to be the hardest part, getting the evidence to the right people. The federal tribunal wasn't going to take the corruption seriously unless she had every piece of the puzzle. And she had been collecting those pieces for months. What Maya didn't know was that her encounter with Richards would be the catalyst for everything that was about to unfold. While she was on her way to the meeting, the first piece of the puzzle had already been set in motion. In a dimly lit room, a group of high-ranking officers within the department were discussing how to handle a growing number of complaints. Their conversations were focused on covering up what they had done, but they had no idea that Maya was closer than they thought. By the time she reached the federal office, her mind was racing. She was prepared, but there was a part of her that still felt the weight of the situation. If she failed, the corruption would continue unchecked. But she wasn't going to fail. As she entered the office, she saw the familiar faces of her colleagues waiting for her. They knew what was at stake, and they trusted her to lead this investigation to the truth. Maya didn't waste any time. She placed the recorder on the table, the sounds of Officer Richards' insults filling the room. The team listened intently as Maya explained the situation. They knew that the recordings were just the beginning. Now, they had to figure out how to use this evidence to bring down the entire network. It was a dangerous game, but Maya was willing to play it. She had always been willing to risk everything for what was right. The team went to work, piecing together the connections and building the case that would bring justice to those who had been wronged. Maya knew it was going to take time, but she was prepared for the fight. As the hours passed, the weight of the task ahead of her began to settle in. This wasn't just about exposing one bad cop. This was about taking down an entire system that had failed the people it was supposed to protect. And Maya was ready to do whatever it took to make sure the truth came to light. Maya sat at the table, her fingers tapping softly on the recorder as the team sifted through the evidence. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but her resolve remained unshaken. The audio from Officer Richards was damning, his racist remarks clear and unmistakable, but it wasn't enough. She knew that. She had been in this position before, gathering evidence, feeling like she was so close to justice, but still needing that one final piece to bring the whole thing crashing down. As the team worked to analyze the recordings, Maya's mind drifted back to the moment she had recorded Richards. The way he had belittled her, accused her of things she hadn't done, all because of the color of her skin. She wasn't angry. She had learned long ago to channel that anger into something more productive. But what Richards didn't know was that his actions were part of something bigger, something that was about to change the course of everything. Hours passed, the team deep in discussion, piecing together the corruption they had been uncovering for months. Maya listened, her mind working faster than ever. She had already anticipated most of what they were going to find. It wasn't just about Richards, it was about the system that had protected him and others like him for so long. But now they had the proof. It was time to move. As Maya looked around the room at her colleagues, she saw the same determination in their eyes. They were ready. She was ready. They had been investigating for months, gathering information from various sources, building a case against the corrupt officers and officials who had been working together to protect each other at the cost of the people they were supposed to serve. Maya stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. The time for waiting was over. She picked up the recorder and walked to the back of the room where her superior, Agent Thompson, was standing. He had been skeptical at first, unsure of whether they could bring down the entire network. But now he saw the same thing Maya saw. The pieces of the puzzle were all falling into place. "It's time," Maya said quietly, her voice steady. Thompson nodded, his face grim but determined. "Let's do this," he said. Maya turned and walked back to the table, the weight of the moment settling in. She knew what was at stake. Everything they had worked for, everything they had sacrificed was about to come to a head. As the team gathered around, Maya outlined the next steps. They would need to move quickly. The longer they waited, the more likely it was that the corrupt officers would cover their tracks. They had to act now, before they could disappear into the shadows once more. The plan was set, and everyone knew their role. Maya felt the familiar surge of adrenaline course through her. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. The time for secrets was over. The truth would be exposed, and nothing could stop it. As the team prepared to move out, Maya glanced at the clock. They had just a few hours before the tribunal, the moment when the evidence would be presented and the corruption would finally be laid bare. She could almost feel the weight of the consequences on her shoulders. This was more than just a case. It was a statement. It was a chance to show the world that even when the system tries to silence you, the truth always finds a way to come out. Maya took a deep breath and walked toward the door. The next few hours would determine everything. But she was ready. She had been ready for this moment for a long time. Maya arrived at the courthouse just before the sun began to set, its orange glow casting long shadows across the marble steps. The weight of the day hung in the air, and her heart beat steadily in her chest as she walked towards the main entrance. This was the moment she had been preparing for. The quiet hum of the building contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She couldn't afford to let her nerves take over. Today, everything would change. Inside, the federal tribunal was already in full swing. Maya's team was in position, waiting for the signal. She walked through the hall, her footsteps echoing off the high walls, each step bringing her closer to the fight she had been waiting for. As she passed through the doors of the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted. It was tense but focused. She could see the faces of her colleagues and allies in the room. Their eyes met hers with silent understanding. They knew what was at stake. Maya took her seat in the front row, not as an observer, but as a key player in this battle for justice. The courtroom was filled with the weight of authority, the quiet buzz of conversation fading as the judge entered. The proceedings began, and Maya focused on the task at hand. She had all the evidence, everything they had gathered, every conversation recorded, every piece of the puzzle now in place. But it wasn't just about the proof. It was about sending a message. Maya knew that bringing down Officer Richards and the others wasn't enough. This was bigger than that. It was about exposing the truth, about showing the world that corruption could not hide forever. As the prosecutor stood to present the case, Maya felt a surge of determination. She had spent months gathering these pieces, each recording a small piece of the larger picture. But now, in this moment, she was about to take the stage. The prosecutor's voice was steady as he began to speak, laying out the evidence before the court. Maya's eyes never left the files in front of her, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of what was about to happen. Richard's name was brought up, and Maya felt a slight shift in the room. She knew the moment was coming. The prosecutor paused and glanced at Maya, signaling her to begin. Maya stood, her movements calm and deliberate, and walked to the front of the courtroom. The eyes of everyone in the room followed her. She felt the gravity of their gaze, but she stood tall. As she began to speak, her voice was steady, her words clear. She outlined the evidence, the recordings, and the damning actions of Officer Richards. Each detail she shared painted a picture of corruption, one that couldn't be ignored any longer. As she spoke, she could feel the eyes of the courtroom on her, but she didn't waver. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The truth was finally coming to light. As the final piece of evidence was presented, Maya stepped back, her job done. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as the weight of her words settled in. Maya returned to her seat, but she could feel the eyes of the room still on her. They had heard the truth, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the judge called for a recess, Maya allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. It wasn't over yet, but it was a step closer. The corruption was exposed. The justice system would never be the same again. Maya sat in the courtroom, her heart still racing from the rush of the morning. The recess had given her a moment to breathe, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. The tension in the room was palpable as the judge prepared to reconvene. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the culmination of months of hard work, dedication, and sacrifice. Maya had been in situations like this before, where it felt like everything was on the line, but this time it was different. This wasn't just about bringing down a corrupt officer. This was about dismantling a system that had failed its people for far too long. As the judge returned to the bench, the room fell silent once again. Maya felt the weight of the moment. She knew this was the turning point, the moment when everything would change. The prosecutor stood up, his voice steady as he spoke. He began to lay out the final pieces of the case, detailing the corruption, the abuse of power, and the way it had permeated the entire department. Maya listened closely, her eyes fixed on the proceedings. She had no doubts now. This case was bigger than just Officer Richards. It was about exposing the truth and bringing justice to those who had been wronged. The defense tried to push back, but their arguments felt weak, desperate even. They had no answers for the evidence that had been presented. They couldn't deny the truth, no matter how hard they tried. Maya could feel the shift in the room. The tide was turning in their favor. The defense's final attempt to discredit the evidence fell flat, and the judge's gavel came down with a sharp, decisive thud. Maya knew what that sound meant. The corruption had been exposed. Officer Richards, along with others in his network, would face the consequences of their actions. As the courtroom began to clear, Maya stood up, her legs slightly shaky, but her spirit strong. She had done what she set out to do. The evidence was irrefutable, and the wheels of justice were finally turning. Maya walked out of the courtroom, her mind already moving to the next phase of the mission. There was still much work to be done. There were still others out there who needed to be held accountable. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. She had brought the truth to light. The battle had been long, but the victory was hers. As Maya stepped outside into the bright sunlight, she took a deep breath. She had fought for this moment, and now the world would see the truth. The system had been shaken, but Maya knew that this was just the beginning. There was always more work to do, but today, justice had won. And that was enough for now. Maya returned to her office later that day, the weight of the court's decision still hanging in the air. It was over, at least for now. Officer Richards had been arrested, his corrupt colleagues implicated, and the investigation she had worked so tirelessly on was coming to its end. Yet, as Maya sat at her desk, she knew that the victory she felt was only one part of the battle. This case had shaken the foundation of the department, but Maya wasn't naive. Corruption was deep-rooted, and though they had taken down one network, there were always more hiding in the shadows. The phone on her desk rang, breaking her thoughts. Maya answered, her voice calm but focused. "Agent Johnson," she said. "It's Agent Thompson," came the voice on the other end. "We've got some good news. The tribunal's ruling has sent shockwaves through the department. The higher-ups are already talking about sweeping reforms." Maya felt a quiet satisfaction, but the feeling was short-lived. She had seen enough to know that words were easy. The real challenge would be making sure the system changed. "That's a start," Maya replied, her voice steady. "But we both know it doesn't end with one arrest. I want to make sure this is just the beginning. We need to keep digging." Thompson's tone softened, as if he could sense Maya's hesitation. "We're with you," he said. "But remember, you've already done more than most could dream of. The people who are still in power won't go down easily. Stay vigilant." Maya nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I will," she said. After the call ended, Maya leaned back in her chair, staring at the files spread out before her. She had done her part, but the truth was this fight was far from over. As she looked out the window, the city seemed calm, as if nothing had changed. But she knew better. The quiet on the outside was nothing compared to the storm brewing underneath. Maya wasn't going to stop until every last shred of corruption was exposed. The rest of the team had already begun gathering more intel, following leads that would hopefully take them deeper into the heart of the system. As Maya prepared to leave the office for the day, she was stopped by a familiar face, her partner, Agent Harris. He walked in her office, looking serious. "You're not going to like this," he said, holding up a folder. "I just had a tip. Some of the higher-ups are planning to fight the tribunal's decision. They're looking for ways to suppress the investigation." Maya stood up, her pulse quickening. "I knew it wouldn't be easy. What do we need to do?" Harris handed her the folder. We need to act fast. They've already started covering their tracks. We can't let them slip through the cracks. Maya's eyes narrowed as she flipped through the papers. This was exactly what she had been worried about. The moment they thought they were safe, someone else was already trying to stop them. She looked at Harris. Let's get to work. The night was falling, but for Maya, the real work was just beginning. As she left the office, the air felt heavier than before. It was a familiar weight, the kind she had carried with her through every investigation. There was no turning back now. Maya was committed to exposing the truth, no matter the cost. As she stepped into the car, she couldn't shake the feeling that the final chapter of this story was still being written, and she was going to make sure. It ended with justice. Maya sat at her desk, the weight of the files before her pressing down like a storm cloud. The case was far from over. She had exposed corruption, yes, but now came the real challenge. The fight to ensure those responsible paid the price. The call she had received from Agent Harris echoed her mind, and the urgency in his voice hadn't faded. The higher-ups were already planning to fight back, and Maya knew she couldn't afford to let her guard down. The tribunal's decision was just the beginning of a long battle. As Maya stared at the files, her thoughts raced. She couldn't believe that, after everything, the system still tried to protect its own. She was used to corruption, but this felt different. It wasn't just about Officer Richards anymore. It was about a network of power and influence that had its claws deep within the department. She glanced at the clock. It was late, but the work was never done. As she gathered her things to leave the office, her phone rang again. This time it was Thompson. Maya. His voice was tense, but there was a note of relief. We've got movement. The board's starting to crack under the pressure. Some of the more influential members are getting nervous. We might have a chance to push them into a corner. Maya's heart quickened. She knew this was it, the moment they'd been waiting for. What's the next step? She asked, her voice steady. We've got a meeting tomorrow with the federal investigators. They're bringing in new intel. It could be the breakthrough we need, Thompson replied. Maya nodded, already feeling the weight of the next step. She was ready, but part of her still couldn't shake the unease. The higher-ups wouldn't go down without a fight. She had seen it too many times. I'll be there, she said. After the call ended, Maya took a deep breath. Tomorrow was going to be critical. If they could gather enough evidence to secure the next phase of the investigation, it could bring everything to light. She wasn't about to let them slip away. The next morning, the team gathered at the federal office, the atmosphere charged with the anticipation of what was to come. Maya felt the familiar tension in the air, the kind that came before a breakthrough, or before everything came crashing down. As the meeting began, Agent Harris presented new intelligence, documents that linked several high-ranking officials to illegal activities. Maya leaned forward, her eyes scanning the papers. This was it, the missing link that would connect everything. The evidence was damning. The room fell silent as Maya processed the information. This was the key they had been waiting for. With this, they could take down the entire operation. She looked around the room at her team. They were all in this together, and Maya knew that, no matter what happened, they had come this far. We're not stopping here, Maya said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. This is just the beginning. We push forward, no matter what. As the meeting came to an end, Maya stepped out of the room, the weight of the evidence now resting on her shoulders. She knew the battle wasn't over. There were still many more steps to take, and the risk was high. But she also knew that, with this new intel, they were one step closer to exposing the entire corruption network. The fight had just begun, but Maya was ready. She had faced far worse, and nothing would stop her now. Maya walked through the door of the federal office, her mind still focused on the meeting from earlier. The team had uncovered more than they had expected, but the next steps were critical. With the new evidence in their hands, they had one shot to take down the entire network. Maya knew this was the final push. If they failed now, all of their work, the countless hours spent uncovering the truth, would be for nothing. As she walked into the conference room, she saw the familiar faces of her colleagues, all of them as determined as she was. Agent Thompson gave her a nod of acknowledgement, and she returned it with a brief smile. They were in this together. The door closed behind her, and the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. Everyone was waiting for the signal, the moment when they would strike. Maya took her seat, her eyes scanning the documents in front of her. This was it. The case they had been building, the corruption they had been exposing, all came down to this. She wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. As the team began to discuss their next steps, Maya's thoughts drifted to the faces of the people who would benefit from their work, the families whose lives had been affected by the corrupt officers, the officers who had hidden behind their badges for too long. They were all counting on this. As the meeting continued, Maya's mind stayed focused, tuning out the noise around her. She had seen how corruption worked from the inside, how those in power tried to manipulate the system to their advantage. It was a game, and Maya had played it better than most. But now, it wasn't just about playing the game. It was about changing the rules. The team had gathered enough evidence to make a solid case, but Maya knew they needed more, something to push the investigation past the tipping point. She looked up from the documents, her eyes meeting Agent Thompson's. Without saying a word, he understood. Maya stood up, signaling the team to follow her. "Let's move," she said, her voice calm but firm. They had done the hard work, and now it was time to finish what they had started. The next few hours would determine everything. As Maya walked out of the room, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Harris. "They're making their move. We have to act fast." Maya's heart skipped a beat. They weren't the only ones planning. The corrupt officials had already begun to make their move, trying to cover their tracks before the final blow. Maya didn't hesitate. She tapped a few quick responses into her phone and motioned for the team to follow her. There was no more time to waste. They had to act now. As she walked through the hallways, Maya's mind was laser-focused on the task at hand. This was what she had trained for, what she had dedicated her life to. The next few minutes would decide the fate of the entire investigation. As she reached the elevator, she took a deep breath. She was ready. The doors opened, and Maya stepped inside, her team following closely behind. She had no idea what they were about to face, but she knew this. No matter what happened, they were going to expose the truth. And that was all that mattered. Maya felt the tension building as the elevator doors slid closed behind her. She wasn't sure if it was the weight of the investigation or the fact that this moment was finally here, the moment that everything they had worked for would come to a head. The silence in the elevator was almost suffocating. Her team stood with her, each person focused, the gravity of the situation clear on their faces. Maya checked her phone again, but there were no new messages from Harris. He had warned them. The corrupt officers were making their move. She had no idea how many would try to cover their tracks, but one thing was certain. The battle was far from over. The elevator dinged, and the doors opened to the underground parking garage. The team walked out, Maya leading the way. They made their way through the rows of parked cars, their footsteps the only sound in the otherwise empty space. Maya's mind was racing, but she pushed the anxiety aside. She had trained for moments like this. She knew the stakes. They had to move fast. There was no room for mistakes. As they approached the car, Maya's phone buzzed again. This time it was Harris. "We've got a situation. They're aware we're moving. They've locked down the building. You need to hurry." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. They had anticipated the danger, but this was worse than she had expected. "We'll be there in 10, Maya replied, her voice calm despite the rush of adrenaline coursing through her. "Don't let them get to the evidence." She hung up, turning to the team. "We're not slowing down. Stay sharp." As they drove toward the building, the streets felt eerily quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Maya's eyes darted to the rearview mirror every few seconds, but she didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Yet, the minutes seemed to stretch on endlessly. It felt like time had slowed down as they neared the federal office. Every second counted now. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. "We're almost there," Maya said, her voice low but steady. "When we get there, we move quickly. We take control." As they pulled up to the entrance, Maya's mind was clear. The evidence was secure. If they could just get inside and present it, the entire corruption network would be exposed. But as they reached the doors, something didn't feel right. The building's main entrance was unusually dark. Maya's instincts kicked in. She signaled for the team to stop. "Stay here," she whispered, stepping out of the car. She moved quickly, her steps light and deliberate. The door was locked. She tried the handle again. Nothing. They've blocked us out, she muttered under her breath. There was no time to waste. They needed to get inside. Maya scanned the area, her eyes narrowing as she saw the side entrance. She knew they had to act fast. She moved toward the side door, her team following closely behind. When they reached it, Maya quickly checked the lock. It was a simple mechanism, nothing they couldn't handle. With a quick twist of her wrist, she had the door open. The sound of it creaking echoed through the hall. Maya motioned for the team to follow. They were inside. She could feel her heart racing, but she kept her breathing steady. She had come too far to back down now. As they moved through the dark hallways, Maya's thoughts shifted to the investigation. They were close. So close. Every lead, every piece of evidence had led them here. The truth would come to light. And nothing, not even the corrupt officials trying to stop them, would stand in their way.